Sinking.
All you. It's your mama.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
You know, I'm grateful to see so many people here today to address an epidemic that has been plaguing our community for decades. My name is Terrell Jones. I work at New York Harm Reduction Educators and Watts Heights Corner Projects, and I'm grateful to be here today. You know, I've lived in the Bronx over 30 years of my life, watching the Bronx from the core down, the burning Bronx, you know what I'm saying? And I watched the first drug epidemic that we had. So a little bit about me, I am a former user, formerly incarcerated, formerly homeless. And through that period of this transition of what I wanted to do with my life, I went into drug treatment programs that didn't work for me. On my last bid, I stated to my family I would never go back to prison again in my life. I had to seek some program that was going to help me with my life. And through the grace of God, I found harm reduction. After being in harm reduction for a couple of months, you know what I'm saying, I was like, I need to stick with this program. Because that was the first place where I found love, dignity, and respect for a person that used drugs. Through my addiction, I've been dehumanized in my own community because I was a drug user. But coming into harm reduction where the love was, people didn't accept me, they didn't judge me, I had to stay around. So I started off as a volunteer. I worked my way up to part-time outreach worker, then full-time outreach worker. And today I've been there 14 years, and I am the Outreach and Advocacy Program Manager of New York Harm Reduction Educators.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
It's very emotional for me because the lifestyle that I lived earlier and to where I'm at today, to see someone like me a couple of years ago being invited to the White House to speak to our Attorney General about harm reduction. You know, I also worked years as a peer specialist where I had ran my own peer program, which is called the Uprise Program at NYRE, the Uniting Peers for the Rights of Injectors and Sex Workers Everywhere. I also work with the Peer Network of New York. I am one of the co-chairs. Ms. Hiawatha Collins is the co-founder, and Ms. Marilyn Scales is one of my co-chairs there, where we do personal and professional development of peers who work in harm reduction. I also like to thank all of the harm reduction agencies for doing this work, like Watts Heights Corner Projects, Harm Reduction Coalition, Peer Network of New York, Watts Heights Corner Projects. And why I mention these individuals, because these are the agencies that are true to harm reduction, the philosophy and the core understanding of what harm reduction is. You have other agencies that pretend that they do harm reduction, but they don't. You know, through this epidemic, when I leave my house in the South Bronx every morning, I live in Hunts Point, people, and I have to carry 2 bags of Narcan with me every morning because of the rate of overdose that's there. Have spoken to family members, friends who have lost their loved ones through the unintentional deaths that knew nothing about Narcan and harm reduction. That today, if they had the education around harm reduction and Narcan, their loved ones might be here today. This is an issue that is not only for this community here. This is a nationwide issue. And we all have to come together, put our biases and everything to the side if we want to tackle this issue. It is no one answer. It is no one way for drug treatment. It has to be what people feel that's comfortable for them. You know, like I said, I promote every basis of treatment, whether people want AA, NA, abstinence-based programs, harm reduction. It's their choice that's going to help them. Why I love harm reduction so much? Because it's client-centered, and when I came in, they addressed the issues that I needed to address, not what they wanted to address. So like I said, I carry my Narcan every day. I had to respond to an overdose in East Harlem, where I heard someone yell, "Get out of his pockets." And when I heard that, I turned over and I looked around with a person unconscious. I ran over, tried to shake the person. I told someone to call 911. I tried to do the sternum rub. The person did not respond. I hit him up with the Narcan. Thank God, about a minute later, as I turned around, EMS was right there. Come to find out, we reversed the overdose, but there was also other medical issues that were involved that EMS took care of. And I'm going to now, say my last words, and then I'm going to introduce the next speaker. I'm grateful for the love, the understanding, the non-judgmental approach that harm reduction has brought to my life. And today, I would not be sitting here if I wasn't given the choice to be there and people treated me with dignity and respect and a lot of love.
Amen. Amen.
So I'm going to introduce our next speaker. And I want to thank the city mayor and the First Lady for paying attention and bringing some more resources to the Bronx. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the First Lady, Chirlane Mccray, an advocate of mental health and an ally on this effort.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And thank you all for being here. And thank you, Terrell, for your generous sharing of your story, your honest and generous sharing, and for emphasizing that there is no one-size-fits-all for what we are faced with right now, and that it's so important that people be treated with dignity. Terrell's story resonates with so many New Yorkers, too many New Yorkers. Here in the Bronx, nearly everyone has been touched by the opioid epidemic in some way. For every person who lives with a substance use disorder, there are family members, friends, and neighbors, many of whom have been part of that person's life as it spiraled out of control and are touched deeply by their struggles. Addiction is a terrible disease, a terribly common disease and treatable, but too often deadly, especially when people are exposed to the dangerous synthetic opioid fentanyl. Last year, our city lost someone to an overdose every 6 hours. But there is good news. Addiction is also treatable. Prevention is possible. And in Spanish, las adicciones son enfermedades comunes que pueden tener consecuencias mortales. La buena noticia es que se pueden tratar y prevenir. In New York City, we are using every tool we have to save lives, connect people to treatment, and prevent substance use disorders from developing in the first place. We have distributed the overdose reversing medication naloxone to New Yorkers in the highest need neighborhoods, including thousands of kids in the Bronx. We have expanded methadone and buprenorphine treatment options for people in need. We are addressing the mental health challenges that often go hand in hand with substance use disorders, because we want to treat the whole person, not just their addiction. Our neighborhood outreach teams are trained to connect people to a wide range of mental health and social services. And today, as we take new actions to double down on our response to the opioid epidemic in the Bronx, we are asking New Yorkers to help. We know that expanding services is not enough. We will work with trusted community partners to embed services into the fabric of the hardest-hit communities of the Bronx so that there is no wrong door, so that people can find help wherever they are. The people who gather in this beautiful church every week have so much power to change the culture of shame that prevents people from seeking help and support them. We all do. We all have that power. We need everyone in neighborhoods all across this city to do what they can. That's why we launched Thrive NYC. We are all touched by addiction and mental illness, and we can all be part of the solutions. I can't say that enough. That anyone can learn more about addiction and the mental illnesses that often cause people to self-medicate to relieve their pain by taking a free mental health first aid course. Anyone can learn to save a life and carry naloxone. And anyone can call 1-888-NYC-WELL for information or to talk with a trained counselor or peer counselor for free. Anyone who seeks help for addiction or a mental health challenge, or anyone who cares about a loved one, will not be turned away. So please, everyone here, spread the word. This information is important to have every day, but especially as we enter the holiday season, which is such a difficult time for so many. If we all do our part, people in communities like this one, all across the city, will know there is always hope, and help is all around them. And that is because of the terrific caring team that is working on this. All these folks are sitting at this table with me today, and the man on my side is leading the way. It is my pleasure to introduce Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chirlane. I want to amplify something you said, and this is why it's so important to understand that the Thrive Initiative, the focus on mental health, goes hand in hand with our efforts to address substance misuse. This is all one common battle. Because for a long time, people didn't know where to turn. And there's still a lot of people in the city that are struggling to figure out what to do about addiction in their family or someone in their lives, or even in their own life. They don't know where to turn. Because of Chirlane's efforts and everyone involved with Thrive, you now can call a single number, 888-NYC-WELL. You can get connected to treatment. You can get connected to naloxone. You can get connected to mental health services. It was not so easy. It was not so clear in the past. But the Thrive Initiative brought that to us all. And there's no one in New York City who should feel that they can't access the help they need. We got to get that word out there. And all that is possible because of the extraordinary efforts of our First Lady and her team. Let's thank her. Now, we're all up here, we're all in public service in one way or another, but Terrell, you have a distinction. You are literally a lifesaver. That one story that Terrell told at street corner in East Harlem, he saved that life. And he walks the streets of the Bronx looking for that moment where someone may need him. Terrell's a very modest guy about his achievements. But I think his achievements are gargantuan. I think what he has done to fight his way back, and recovery is a lifelong process. I know a lot of people in recovery, and I admire them deeply. I admire you, Terrell, for all you've done. But you have not just worked so hard on your own recovery. You have worked to bring so many other people in the right direction. So I think we got a lot of public servants up here, but we also have an angel who's walking among us. Terrell, thank you. You're going to hear from some of my colleagues in a moment. I also want to acknowledge and thank for really exceptional work, all of it related to what we're talking about today. I want to thank our Acting Health Commissioner, Dr. Oxiris Barbeau, for the great work of her and her team. I want to thank, let's give them a round of applause. From the NYPD, representing the Borough Command of the Bronx, I want to thank Deputy Chief Timothy McCormick. Thank you to you and all your team. From the Sanitation Department, I want to thank Inspector Peter LaMarche, and to all the good folks at Sanitation who are important to what we're talking about today as well. Of course, we should remember where we are today, and I want to thank our host, Father Francis Skelly, for having us here today. Thank you so much. And a special thank you acknowledgement to everyone behind me here who is part of doing this work at the community level and making sure that people get the help they need. These are some New York heroes right here. Let's thank them. So we're in the middle of a battle. We're in the middle of a battle against opioids. This has gotten harder, not easier, over recent years, especially because of fentanyl. But what this city decided to do was to take this battle head on. We saw what was happening around the city. We saw what was happening around the nation. There was a surge of opioid overdose deaths. It was unacceptable. It had to be confronted. But I have to be honest with you, the old ways of addressing this crisis weren't going to work. We had seen the previous approach. It was well-meaning. It was important. It just wasn't going to work in the context of an escalating crisis. The old way of doing things was to have a lot of services available, but folks suffering from addiction had to go seek them out. And it wasn't always where they lived. It wasn't always in a place they felt comfortable or with people who spoke their language or understood them. So there were a lot of good people and a lot of good programs, but not enough people got the help they needed. That was true even before this crisis escalated, but when the crisis escalated, it put this all in sharp, sharp perspective. We realized that the past approach wasn't going to work, and we needed something much more aggressive. We had to bring the treatment to the people who needed it. We had to bring the preventive efforts to the people who needed it. We had to help people heal right in their own community, right on their own block. So that was the underlying idea behind the Healing NYC initiative. We knew we had to innovate. We knew we had to change. We knew we could save hundreds of lives if we got it right. We announced it last year, $60 million effort. And the whole idea was to see if we could crack the code, to see if we could figure out how to reach people in a way that actually stuck, to reach them in a way that would actually move them to change. I want to be clear that we're still in the midst of this crisis, unquestionably. We're still in the midst of this battle. But the surge we saw before, that horrible surge in deaths, that horrible sense that things were spinning out of control, that has ended. I am happy to say that in this city, we're fighting the battle and we're starting to win. For this last year, we saw, finally, a leveling off in the number of overdose deaths after the horrible reality we experienced in 2016. I want to remind people, in 2016, overdose deaths jumped up 51% compared to the previous year. In 2017, there was a small increase, and every single human being we lose is a tragedy. But in 2017, number of deaths barely moved compared to 2016. That showed us that change was possible. But it also became clear we had to do a lot more. And we had to learn from what worked. And what we saw was a place where there was some actual, tangible good news that showed us the way forward. That was Staten Island. A lot of you were with us on Staten Island the last time we gathered to talk about our efforts. We now know that overdose deaths went down in Staten Island in 2017 compared to 2016. And we know that that was because of extraordinary outreach efforts that reached deep into the Staten Island community. Some of the folks you see behind me are faith leaders. It worked in Staten Island because faith leaders were front and center. It worked in Staten Island because hospitals were front and center, because community leaders, elected officials, everyone understood they had to reach whole families. They had to find the person that someone trusted, that they would listen to, that they would feel comfortable with. It was a community-wide effort. And although the battle is far from over in Staten Island, it proved to us that there was a model that we needed to use everywhere. But it also was clear to us that the challenges in the Bronx were the toughest in the entire city. And there's some real objective reasons why. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I want to name up front. In the Bronx, obviously a lot of folks for whom English is not the first language. In the Bronx, there's a lot of folks who happen to be immigrants. including folks who in the last couple of years, because they happen to be undocumented, often don't feel comfortable coming forward for the help they need. The Bronx has a history of dealing with some of the toughest challenges in the city, but not getting the support it deserved. And that is part of why we still have a lot of work to do here. But what we saw work in Staten Island can certainly work here. And so we've had resources in reserve waiting to apply to a strategy that actually worked. We have found a strategy that's starting to work. And now we are moving those resources to the Bronx immediately. And we're announcing today the Bronx Action Plan to make a difference in the communities of this borough. It will work when we get deep, deep into each neighborhood. It'll work when we find folks who before were not willing to engage in any way. It'll work when every hospital is fully in partnership with us, where the emergency room is a place where we can engage people at the point of contact. It'll obviously work if we do a lot more distribution of naloxone and buprenorphine, because we know that those medications work. We can save lives, and then we can do the painstaking work of helping people to recover. Imagine a lot more people like Terrell, who not only come back, but then turn around and help others. If you want to visualize where this strategy aims to go, just look right there at that gentleman. Turning people's lives around, reaching deeper into communities. We also are, as part of this plan, going to deal with some of the honest, hard truths that come from this crisis. One of the things we have seen in the Bronx, and some of my colleagues have raised this, particularly Councilmember Ayala, very, very intensely, is we see some parks in this community that have way too many syringes in them. A single syringe is way too many, obviously, but we see some parks that are really suffering, and we're going to do a lot more to secure those parks, to address the needs of the individuals who desperately should be in treatment, and also to make sure those are clean, safe places for the community. So, there's a lot to do in this borough, and Lord knows there's a lot to do all over the city and all over this country. We still have to stop physicians from over-prescribing opioids. That is still the way too many New Yorkers end up hooked. And Dr. Blasio, Dr. Barbeau are very focused on this effort, and we've made progress, but we've still got work to do. We are still suing the big pharmaceutical companies that created so much of the And we're not suing them just to express our anger. We're suing them to get resources from them to get some of those ill-gotten gains and turn them back to provide treatment for people who are suffering. I'll conclude and turn to my colleagues as saying, I've said this several times, and I'm going to keep saying it. If we really stick to our goal for the next 4 years being the fairest big city in America, it means recognizing where problems are and addressing them in a forthright manner and being open and honest about them. There's a challenge here in the Bronx. It must be addressed. It can be addressed. This is an epidemic that can be defeated. But we're only going to do it with the people of the Bronx. We're only going to do it if we get deep, deep into each community. And that's what we aim to do. A few words in Spanish. Nuestra ciudad está avanzando en la lucha contra los opioides y revirtiendo el aumento a las sobredosis. Hoy estamos dando otro paso para llegar a los más necesitados en el Bronx, para conectarlos con tratamientos y salvar vidas. Vamos a seguir adelante hasta triunfar en esta lucha. en el Bronx y en toda nuestra ciudad. With that, I want to turn to some of the folks who are really on the front line of this, starting with our deputy mayor, and she's going to give you some more specifics of the plan. She's been leading the way on Healing NYC. My pleasure to introduce Dr. Herminia Blasio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and First Lady, for your unwavering dedication and support in this important issue. Thank you to Dr. Barbeau, my colleague in arms here, and to council members Ayala and Salamanca and District Attorney Clark for your leadership here in this great borough. And a special thanks to Terrell for sharing your story and for reminding us about the pain, but also about the triumph that we can see every day as we tackle this issue. As the Mayor and First Lady mentioned, we are indeed encouraged by some of the progress that we're seeing in Healing and from Healing NYC initiatives. Healing NYC has brought many innovative programs to prevent overdose and connect people to care. That is, in fact, how we have begun to bend the curve, even here in the Bronx. Even here in the Bronx, we have slowed the increase in overdose death rates from 30% increase in 2016 to a 9% increase in 2017. But an increase is unacceptable. And we just haven't slowed rates in the Bronx as much as we have in other parts of the city, and that's why we're here today, to double down our efforts and to make sure that we bring resources and that we track resources to where the need is. There are two maps here that show you the services in the Bronx before and after Healing NYC. But we know we have much more to do. We're just not bending the slope as fast as we need to. The Bronx still has the highest rate and number of overdose deaths in the city. There were a total of 363 people, individuals, real people, not just a number, mothers, daughters, sons, sisters, cousins, real people who died last year unnecessarily. The South Bronx has 2 times the citywide rate. Helping the Bronx is important to me as a city official, but I have to admit, as a native Bronxite, it holds a special place in my heart. As a native Bronxite, I know that the people of the Bronx are resilient. I know that as much as the Bronx suffers hardships, there are tremendous community assets here, a tremendous power and will to survive, even when it seems like the odds are stacked against you. Our role as city government is to tap into this borough's incredible strength, its incredible connectedness, to change the course of this epidemic, not for community, but as you've heard the mayor and the First Lady say, with community. As part of Healing NYC, the city is now analyzing data on overdose deaths much faster, so that when we see a neighborhood increase, we can deploy assets rapidly and equitably in response to these trends. Specifically, as you've heard, we're investing in new partnerships with community and creating more support networks for people who use drugs. Let me walk you through some of the ways in which we're going to be doing that. Health workers will be going to neighborhoods of high need and meeting with people and giving them education and naloxone kits. You've heard how important it is for real people, average people, who do extraordinary things. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. When we give them the tool, people rise to the occasion. We call this program the Rapid Assessment and Response. So today we're expanding that program in the Bronx to go even deeper. Our health reach-out workers are going to be going to bodegas, to barbershops, to houses of faith. wherever people spend time. And we need to continue to work even more closely with community. So I want to highlight a couple of initiatives that we've already begun. We're proud to fund Radical Health, a Bronx-based organization, to engage people who use drugs but whom we in the city haven't been able to reach yet. Radical Health will help us provide education, will help us learn from people who are suffering how we can best help them. Radical Health will also work with other community leaders and businesses to engage them in conversation about overdose death risk in the Bronx. And with the help of the First Lady's Thrive NYC initiative, we're supporting another new group, very appropriate to the place that we're sitting here, Faith in Harm Reduction, a partnership of Bronx faith leaders and health organizations working together to educate people about harm reduction, helping people reduce stigma, helping people learn about naloxone, helping people be able to use naloxone to help their neighbors, their loved ones, their friends, helping connect people to treatment. Public education writ large remains a key. Fentanyl, as you know, is a very potent drug that is driving this terrible increase in overdose deaths. The city is working on a new awareness campaign to make sure that we keep the scourge of fentanyl front and center. This campaign will appear in barbershops and billboards all over the Bronx. As we work to more deeply engage the community, we're also expanding an array of services, of other services for people who use drugs. In the past, you've heard the police commissioner say, we can't arrest our way out of this issue. That is the old way. That is not the way that this administration, under the leadership of Mayor de Blasio, is addressing this public health and medical issue. So today we're announcing that our first responders, like police, like fire, now have a new health-only resource that they can dispatch when responding to calls about individuals with mental health and substance use issues. We call these HEAT teams, and they deploy one social worker and a peer advocate, someone like Terrell with lived experience. Someone who knows what it is to be in the throes of addiction, a medical condition, who knows what it is to seek treatment that's appropriate for them, who knows what the power of dignity and respect can do to your ability to heal. These teams will find people and meet them where they are when they need assistance and connect them to health and social services. 2 of these teams will be available in high-need areas right here in the Bronx. You may also be familiar with our Relay program, which addresses people at that moment when they have had a near-fatal overdose, when they have actually survived an overdose and are at a moment where they have just had a close brush with death. They're in the emergency department, processing what just happened. And as part of Relay, we can dispatch peers to have a conversation with them at that very scary moment in time in somebody's life. But it's a moment that is both scary, but offers hope. It offers the promise of a second chance. And we have peer advocates who can work with them, who can teach them about naloxone, who can provide harm reduction, who can follow up with them for up to 3 months to continue to make sure that they're connected to the types of drug treatment and supportive services that are right for them as individuals. Relay is currently available at 6 private hospitals across the city, including 2 here in the Bronx. And today we're announcing a 3rd one that will be up and running at Bronx Care in the new year. In addition, Health in Hospitals has launched the first consult for addiction treatment and care in hospitals, or CACS teams at Lincoln Hospital, to connect patients who are admitted with substance use disorder to medications for addiction treatment and other substance use outpatient care. And last but not least, as you've heard the mayor mention, we have heard complaints about discarded syringes in our streets, and we're here to tell you we hear you loud and clear. Today, we're expanding the work of parks with the Parks Department to clean up syringes from public spaces in the South Bronx. I believe that these measures, coupled with our ongoing initiatives, will go a long way to changing the course of the opioid epidemic here in my home borough. Thank you, and I too will say a few words in Spanish. El programa del alcalde Healing NYC ha logrado frenar el aumento de los muertes por sobredosis de drogas. Pero ese progreso es menos pronunciado aquí en el Bronx. Este plan trae más recursos y estrategias a zonas en el Bronx con altos índices de sobredosis de drogas, incluyendo más colaboración con la comunidad para conectar a las personas que usan drogas con medicinas para la adicción. Gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Blasio. And now, I want to follow through on the comment that Dr. Blasio made, and she quoted Jimmy O'Neill when he said, "We can't arrest our way out of this problem." Our law enforcement community is looking at the opioid crisis with a whole new approach and a whole sense of partnership with all the other parts of government and the community. One of the leaders in that effort, and someone who knows the challenges of the Bronx intimately and has a real sense of what to do to address them, the District Attorney of the Bronx, Darcel Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. First Lady Chirlane Mccray, it's wonderful to be here with you. Father Francis Skelly, thank you so much for hosting this. You have been a bastion of hope and healing in the South Bronx for so many years. Thank you for having us. To my partners in government, council members Salamanca and Ayala, thank you for being here. I know you know how important this is to your communities. And also to Deputy Mayor Palacos and Acting Commissioner Barbeau, thank you. A special thank you to you, Terrell, because hearing stories like yours reminds me each and every day why I do the work that I do. I do it so that we can hear those stories and not the ones that I see on my doorstep each and every day. So thank you for the work that you are doing. And to those faith and community leaders sitting behind me, many of whom I know, thank you for the work that you do day in and day out. You don't get the recognition or the praise, but we know that the work makes the difference. And you know that doing it is important more than getting the recognition for it. It's about saving lives, and you do that each and every day. Thank you for doing that. You know, I'm a daughter of the Bronx. I lived in this community my whole life, and I know personally that the Bronx has been underserved for so many years in terms of prevention efforts and treatment options for those who have become addicted to opioids. This epidemic is not new to the Bronx, and any of us here in the Bronx know that. It looks new to other communities, but we've always suffered from it. And I know that personally since I've been here and my family has been here, and I've seen it happen to so many friends and family. And you know, as a DA, I had to look at that situation when I took office, knowing what I knew personally from my years living here and seeing what the present looked like. And I realized that our situation was very unique, because unlike some other communities, our population of substance use disorder people are older than the average people. And something else that I found out also is that so many of them have been involved in the criminal justice system for so long because of their medical condition. So, Mr. Mayor, I tell you, I welcome these new programs that you're, I want to say this, finally bringing to the Bronx.
Amen.
All right? And these resources from your office, Mr. Mayor, will really help us fight the scourge that has damaged the Bronx for so long, not just now, but from before. This continues to be the condition here. My office has been on the front lines, first to stop the supply of the heroin and fentanyl coming into our communities. And with my partnership with the NYPD, and Chief McCormick is here, as well as the Office of the Special Narcotics Prosecutor and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, we are making strides in that area. So know that we will continue to do this work until we can eliminate those who are pushing this poison into our communities. But I'm also on the front line of providing treatment instead of jail time for those long-term substance abusers. And as Commissioner O'Neill said, you can't arrest his way out of there. I can't prosecute my way out of this. We have to have a more humane system to deal with this. So these programs, Dr. Palazzo, that you just announced, vital. Because the police and law enforcement need to have options other than arresting people and putting them in jail. You know, when you don't have resources, the default is the police department and the DA's office. And it shouldn't have to be. We need to concentrate on these people that are bringing the violence and the drugs into our community. And arresting people who have a medical condition is not a way to do that. So I'm so grateful for these things. My office started what we call the OAR program, or the Overdose Avoidance and Recovery Program, a year ago. Next week it'll be 1 year. And what it is it is a program for those high-frequency users that we're talking about, those who have on average 8 to 9 convictions in their history. These are people who ordinarily wouldn't be eligible for certain services because they've been criminally involved. I see them every day. The police department have to bring them to me every day. We needed to do something for those people. So what I did was start this OR program where it's a pre-plea program, meaning a person doesn't have to plead guilty first in order to get the services. If they're arrested and they need treatment, we are there to give it to them right away there in the court. And I suspend the prosecution to give them the opportunity to engage in treatment so that they can turn their lives around. And you know what? And since the Bronx had the highest rate of overdoses, and unfortunately we're still here, and again, this is something that, you know, we have to deal with every day. I'm so tired of being first in everything that's bad and last in everything that's good. So this is a program that's turning it around, and just in 1 year, we've already saved 50 lives, because these people in this program are the ones that were at highest risk to overdose. So I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to do more. Mayor, I'm so happy for this Bronx action plan that you have, and just know that it's going to complement the efforts that I am doing in this struggle to save lives and communities, and you will have the full support of the Office of the Bronx District Attorney. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much, District Attorney. Now I want to turn to the Chair of the Committee on Mental Health, Disabilities, and Addiction in the City Council. I want to say that Councilmember Diana Ayala has been at the forefront of addressing these issues and also recognizing how they all connect. The mental health challenges connect with substance misuse, also connects with some of the fundamental underlying challenges, including poverty, including lack of affordable housing. She's working to address all of these pieces in a really powerful way together, and I want to thank her for her leadership. Councilmember Diana Ayala.
Thank you. I'm sorry I have a cold, but like many of my constituents, you know, drug addiction and the consequences of drug addiction have been, you know, hit me close to home. And so it's a personal issue, and it just happened to be ironic that I ended up chairing this committee because it speaks so closely to me and to my heart and to who I am and the experiences that I've experienced growing up. And so I'm excited to be here, but not excited to be here for this reason. But I think that we all end up where we need to be, and thank you, Darcel. I really want to be Darcel Clark, like, so badly. I really thank her for her efforts, because this is a very unique situation that we're faced in, and I think that for many of us, I was very little when we faced the heroin epidemic of the late 70s, and I still remember that very vividly. Even though I was a small child, because it does have an effect on us. And these are things that stay, these are traumatic events that stay with us for the entirety of our lives. But I want to thank the Mayor de Blasio, First Lady Mccray, Deputy Mayor Blasio, and Commissioner Barbeau for being here today and for working together to create a comprehensive plan. As many of you already know, and it's been said many times today, the Bronx has an overdose rate that's higher than 49 states. Disproportionately impacting neighborhoods including Mott Haven, Highbridge, and Port Morris, neighborhoods that Councilmember Salamanca and I both represent. Just last week, Councilmember Salamanca and I joined various city agency representatives to do a walkthrough of 146th Street through 149th Streets, areas that are in desperate need of the city's help. We wanted the agency officials to get a first-hand look at what it was that we were experiencing. In the Bronx, so that the response will be more holistic, responsible, and equitable. And I think that the Bronx Action Plan actually fits all of those criteria. We're increasing access to life-changing medications, such as buprenorphine. We're training more people in the naloxone. We're providing drug users with the referrals and education that they need. We're reducing syringe waste, a request constituents have been bringing to my attention for months. And we're also engaging with the community to ensure that they play a role in combating the epidemic. We cannot afford to lose any more lives, and we cannot afford for people to lose their jobs, their homes, and their families. We had to act, and the Bronx Action Plan moves us in the right direction. In closing, I would like to thank Terrell, Marilyn, Pastor Seeley, Michael Brady, and all of you who have been working on the front line to combat this crisis. Social service providers, syringe exchange programs, clergy, and local residents. The work that you do is truly invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Finally, I want to turn to Councilmember Rafael Salamanca, and he has also been a powerful voice. And I want to say one of the things I've always appreciated about the councilmember is he started out as the district manager for his community board. He literally understood his community block by block. And he's been one of the voices saying to us at City Hall that there has to be an approach in the Bronx that reaches deeper to the grassroots, or we're not going to reach the people we need to reach. So I want to thank him for pushing us in that direction. And welcome Councilmember Rafael Salamanca.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and First Lady. Welcome to the South Bronx. I want to definitely welcome and thank our District Attorney, Dr. Clark, for being here, Dr. Blasio, Dr. Barbeau, and my colleague, Diana Ayala. And I want to give a big shout out to Father Skelly for hosting us today at Immaculate Conception. Thank you, Father Skelly. For decades, the South Bronx has been battling issues surrounding rapid opioid use due to the number of methadone clinics, needle exchange programs, and drug dealers in this area. There's nearly 30 of these clinics and programs right here in just a few blocks radius. It's a high concentration that has created a complicated environment. If you spend any time in this area, you've seen people openly using on the sidewalk, drug dealers selling, needles lying around, and many who are slumped over or sprawled across the way, no matter what time of day it is. My community has had enough. And we've been hard at work over the past year to really tackle the opioid crisis at home. Together with Acacia Network and the 3rd Avenue Bid, we launched the Bronx Opioid Collective Impact Project, a joint initiative with dozens of community organizations, providers dedicated to ending this crisis in our community, and held the first ever Bronx Opioid Community Summit. Over the past few months, these organizations have held cleanups, rallies, info sessions, and more to educate and help those in need. I've met with NYPD, parks, community leaders, and key stakeholders throughout the city to continue raising awareness to this issue. The group, Take Back the Hub, a small but mighty group of local residents, have held rallies every Tuesday since the summer, and I thank you for your persistence. I've also taken this fight to City Hall, where I have fought for $500,000 for St. Anne's harm reduction, and I see Joyce Rivera's in the house, and Acacia to combat the opioid crisis here in the South Bronx. And I have 2 pieces of pending legislation, Mr. Mayor. One that will require all schools carrying naloxone and other opioid antagonists. And the second, which will create a substance abuse mobile app that provides information about available drug and alcohol services. Everyone in my office, including myself, is trained in how to administer naloxone. I mention all of these details to show just how much work and time has gone into battling the opioid crisis. We're not only educating and raising awareness, but we're also teaching how to administer naloxone, hosting syringe cleanups. It's not a one-solution fix. It will take all of these tactics and more. And that's also why I supported you, Mr. Mayor, when you announced the safe injection sites around the city. Before the face of opioid crisis was white, it was black and brown, and it is still black and brown. But now, with the city behind us, today's a step in the right direction. The HEAT teams, the Health and Hospital Catch team, and other innovative programs that will bring more healthcare professionals and response team is critical. The total $8 million that has the potential to be a benefit to our community. I am glad that the mayor saw the need in our community and decided to act on it. And I hope that the Bronx Action Plan is a game changer for the South Bronx. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. And we're now going to turn to our colleagues in the media, and we're going to do questions on today's announcement, obviously on the opioid situation overall. And then we'll break for a second, let folks move on, and we'll take other types of questions as well. Let's start on this announcement. Yes?
Street teams that'll be going out to bodegas and other places in the neighborhoods. Will they be distributing naloxone kits on site, providing training on site?
So I just want to start and then pass to Dr. Blasio and Dr. Barbeau. You know, the teams have more than one thing that they need to do. I want to emphasize that. In some cases, it is getting naloxone out there, but in a lot of cases, it's also connecting people to treatment and getting people comfortable with the notion of coming in for treatment, which is one of the big problems. So they have more than one role to do, but let's let the experts speak about it.
Yeah, I'll just begin. We do have, in fact, many mechanisms to get people naloxone and get people trained. That can be through pharmacies, it can be through community-based organizations, it can be through the teams, and I will let Dr. Barbeau provide more detail.
So these teams will not be distributing naloxone during their visits, but they will be providing education and resources and linking folks to where they can go to get naloxone trainings.
Okay, yes.
I wanted to kind of a two-part question. One is about the funding. Is this new funding on top of the annual $60 million, or are you shifting resources?
So let me start with that and then do your next question in a moment. On the funding, 2 pieces. One, there are some new elements like the anti-syringe efforts. That's new funding. The main part of this funding was being held for the decision on where to apply it and which piece of our anti-opioid initiative to apply it to. So when we started Healing NYC, we said explicitly we had to figure out something new that would work. I told you in particular the experience we had in Staten Island convinced us that intensive outreach effort was the way to go. We had money in reserve. We're applying that money to the Bronx. Good.
When you announced the expansion last year of the extra $22 million, it seemed like a program that was citywide, but obviously the hotspot was Staten Island and the Bronx. Now you seem to be saying that it's had a bigger impact in Staten Island than the Bronx. Is that because of how the resources were allocated, or what?
I'll start, and again, my colleagues can jump in. I don't think it's because of the resources. I think it's because the approach, we found that we could break through in Staten Island and that it was a very positive strategy. But as I said, I think there are some objective hurdles in the Bronx. We can all say them out loud. Obviously, you have more people whose first language is not English, more folks who are immigrants, and that is a question of what people are going to be comfortable with if you're trying to engage them. And I do think, very painfully, for folks who happen to be undocumented, there's so many signals they're getting now from Washington to not come out in the open that's causing people not to get the treatment they need that might save their lives, too. So I think those are some of the factors that make the Bronx situation different and require a more in-depth strategy. You want to add?
No, I think you have. Sorry. I think that's right. And we deployed a lot of resources in the Bronx with both the initial healing investment and the second healing investment. What we have also done, though, is been looking at our data in very rapid order. So as opposed to like the usual death data routine would often take a longer period of time, we're looking at data trends very rapidly and deploying resources according to those data trends. So what we saw was a more rapid decrease in Staten Island and a less rapid decrease in the Bronx. And so we are putting more resources to try to make sure that we bend that curve. So this is really where we see the need, we are putting in resources to try to continue to make those decreases even more steep.
David?
And Thrive NYC. What money is coming from Thrive? Where is that going? What is the Thrive piece of this? I don't understand it.
It's the specific Thrive initiatives that connect to this. So again, the two pieces kind of overlap in some ways. Can you tease out which money stream is which, or do we need to get back?
We can get back. Healing NYC is sort of under the broad umbrella of Thrive, and we've got a lot of mental health services. For example, the HEAT teams will be addressing mental health issues, not just substance abuse issues, so there's quite a bit of overlap.
On the HEAT teams, how are they dispatched? It seems as if they're going when there's already a first responder there. So how do they
Let me do the layman's version and then go to the experts, because I'm proud to say I asked some of the same questions that all of you are asking to make sure I understood. I think it's important to recognize, just like we were talking about, you can't arrest your way out of the problem, that the medical community, which obviously was trying to save lives, was not trained to think about how to hand off to ongoing mental health support, ongoing treatment. It's not that people wouldn't ideally want to have done it. It's that, bluntly, everything was very hand-to-mouth, and there wasn't a coherent vision of how to do that. I think the power of this model says the minute you have identified someone, because tragically they're in the emergency room, you're bringing in the peer counselors, you're bringing in the experts, who are then part of taking them the next step. Now, doctors, that's my layman's interpretation. Tell me if I'm in the ballpark there.
Well, that is certainly one of the programs, and I think you were also referring to one of the other. We've got a lot of alphabet soup here.
Yeah, let's try and avoid alphabet soup, yeah.
In our program. So when the calls go in, when a police officer is getting a call or a fire department is getting a call that appears to be primarily health-related, they can actually call a dispatch desk, which is co-located with some police and health to dispatch a team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the point of this is that we're doing everything possible to de-escalate situations that are preventable and touching people where they are, when they're most vulnerable, and when they're most open to engaging in services. And so, for example, the relay teams work with emergency departments as a way to capture folks when they're at their most likely to be open to services. And similarly, the HEAT teams are a way to ensure that we don't criminalize situations that should really be more medicalized, and we have more of a human touch, and treat people with the dignity and respect and treat it as a medical issue as opposed to a criminal issue.
In a real-world situation, someone's calling 911 because of an extreme situation with a substance, namely an overdose, and so there's very rapid medical response to that, often also police response. At what stage and who is calling this HEAT team to get them there?
Right, so these situations wouldn't be for those life-threatening situations. We would still want people to call 911 if someone is having an active overdose
I think I'm going to
situation.
intervene. I think the question is, when does the heat team come into it? Who brings them in?
Right, so these are in combination with police. So when someone is calling the dispatch desk, if it sounds like something that is not an emergency, they will then go with their heat counterparts.
Way back. Let's go from the back forward. Way back. Who's last? Jill.
Here, about a year ago, the Daily News wrote a story, or a series of stories about a railroad cut, an abandoned railroad cut just a few blocks from here where people were sort of frequently gathering to use heroin and other drugs. And I'm curious if you can give me, I know we sort of spoke about this a little bit broadly, but if you can give me a sense of how these programs that are aimed at meeting people where they are can interact with people who might be using drugs in a setting like that, where they're in sort of an abandoned area, they're kind of off the beaten track or not.
So it's a very important question because it gets to our strategy. Our strategy is not to allow those kind of abandoned areas to exist any longer. And that's really important to recognize. We have a clear directive to the police department, to the health department, to the sanitation department, to the Department of Homeless Services, that no such encampment is tolerable in New York City, and it has to be disbanded as soon as it's identified. You're right, that was a notorious location that was there for years, I think even decades. So the challenge that now connects to this announcement today is, okay, so you got those folks away from what was a horrible, dangerous, permanent trap of addiction. Now they're out in the broader community. We have to reach them. We have to reach them in ways that are different than what we did before. Because again, the more passive, like having various centers, and you look at these maps when you get a chance, having places that people could go, but people weren't actually using, wasn't a solution. And the more we experimented, the more we realized you have to go out to people in whatever voice they will hear. Terrell is a great example. People will listen to Terrell who might not listen to someone from the health department, or they might listen to a minister, or they might listen to someone from a community organization. Everyone needs to be reached a different way. But what we will not tolerate, once we know of any place that has become a location, we're not going to allow those kind of locations to exist in the city. That was something that was true in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even the last decade. We don't accept that. Yeah.
What is your feeling on medical marijuana as a potential treatment for opioid addiction?
I don't actually know enough to answer, so let's turn to the doctors.
Well, very broadly, there's studies that suggest in locations that have legalized marijuana, the rate of overdose deaths have gone down. Yeah. So that is, are lower. So very broadly, it seems like it's a potential ally in this place to legalize.
But I would add that the science still isn't clear in terms of what the impact will be.
For individuals, for individual use.
Specifically, I believe in July, it was included as one of the approved uses of medical marijuana in New York State. Sort of kind of slipped under the radar a little bit. I guess I'm wondering if you think that this is something that the city could potentially...
Can you just clarify, because I want to make sure we're all speaking the same way. You said in July it was approved as one of the uses in New York City. So again, I like to be open about my ignorance. I don't remember that milestone. I don't remember that approval. I don't, if it happened, which entity approved it. So either of you?
I am not aware of that.
Yeah, I would say that not aware of the data, but I think it's an important opportunity to emphasize that what we do know is that medication-assisted treatment through methadone, through buprenorphine are evidence-based interventions that we know work. And before we sort of open the door on what medical marijuana might or might not do, I think what we are all engaged in is ensuring that we maximize the number of people that are taking advantage of these proven treatments.
Okay, yes.
We recently did a story looking at how much the city has spent on naloxone since 2014 and how many patients should be around the city. And since 2014, the city has spent more than $22 million on naloxone.
that last part I couldn't hear you well. They don't keep track of multiple, what did you say?
They don't keep track of someone who may use naloxone not once but twice.
You mean who needs to be saved multiple times? Right.
Saves on one person. Do you think that that is needed given how much the city is spending on these kits and given the fact that addicts often say they use naloxone not once but twice or more over the course of their addiction to revive an overdose?
I'm just going to offer my view as someone who's not a medical professional and then turn to the medical professionals. Look, I think we have to be clear that our role in government is try and protect people. And naloxone has been a crucial part of this strategy. I mean, unquestionably, one of the reasons that the tide is turning in this city is that we got naloxone in the hands of the NYPD, FDNY, and a lot of community organizations, clergy, you name it. That greater distribution has made a big impact. I think I understand your point that there are some people, unfortunately, who it's not like you save them once and then they immediately connect to treatment and everything's going to be great. I think we're clear-eyed about the fact that there will be some people who we have to save multiple times before we can get them on the right track. But so long as we're keeping them alive, it opens that door to getting them to treatment. All right, I think Terrell has a strong view on this.
And to further answer the question, the mayor hit it right on the head. Because the simple fact that you don't know why this person is using and why they overdose so many times. For someone to be on the front lines every day, when we run into these obstacles, we educate people. Our agency right now has saved 201 lives in 1 year.
Wow.
We have given out over 6,000 naloxone kits. And I don't care if I have to give it to a person twice, as long as they're safe and they're going to live. It doesn't make, I mean, like, you hear it is, you put in restrictions, it sounds like, on giving out naloxone kits. We are here to save lives, ma'am. We're here to make sure that they are allowed to have informed education about their lives, their health. We don't put any type of restriction. This is what we call harm. We turn our backs on no one. We're always there on the front line for the person until they can make an informed decision about their life.
Amen. Amen.
I just want to add to what Terrell said. We wouldn't stigmatize someone who had more than one asthma attack because they weren't able to make the proper lifestyle changes, or maybe the medication wasn't working as well for them, or whatever the reason might be. Maybe the diagnosis wasn't as complete as it should be. Maybe there are other factors. We wouldn't say, oh, well, forget you. you know, we're going to give up on you. We wouldn't do that for someone who is suffering from diabetes. We know that it takes some time sometimes for people to turn their lives around when they have a medical condition that is complicated, and that is what we're all here talking about. And we don't label people as addicts.
Thank you.
These are people with a medical condition who need help.
Well said. Well said. Good? Okay. Yes.
Just clarify, heard talk that the surge is over, that there's been a leveling off. Is the overdose rate still going up, but at a slower pace?
Yes, but it's just I want to be very, very straightforward about this. Again, Dr. Blasio referred to something I want to frame this with. There used to be a very painstaking effort to determine if something was an overdose, Office of Medical Examiner, NYP, all sort of health department. We still are doing that painstaking effort, but we're trying to look at information quickly and at least take basic information to determine strategic moves. But what we're saying when we talk about 2016 and we talk about 2017, we now have closed the book. We have the final information. 2016, there were 51% more deaths than 2015. Unbelievable explosion. In 2017, there were 2% more deaths. It's still, any additional death is too many. But you can see it's night and day. 2% more deaths means we've essentially leveled off. Also, we saw in the borough of Staten Island the actual number of deaths go down. It was 119 in 2016. It was 101 in 2017. What this says to us is this crisis can be arrested. It can be stopped dead in its tracks, and then we can turn to start reducing the number. So we're not by any means satisfied, but I will tell you that 2017 showed us that it's possible to do something very different and succeed. That's why we're now applying these strategies very intensely in the Bronx. See if there's anything else on this. Yes?
In May, your administration announced it was placing 60 disposal kiosks or syringes in the Bronx and the parks. Just wondering if you have an update on that. Do you know if those are working, collecting, and is that program continuing?
I'll turn to our health commissioner. I'll say, I'm not going to say it's not working. She'll say her professional view. I can say there's more we got to do. That's why we're doing this cleanup effort, because clearly not everyone is using those kiosks who should. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think you got it just right. We certainly have seen that the kiosks are being used, and we want to ensure that individuals who are using these syringes are disposing of them in the safest way possible. But clearly, you know, on the visit that we did with Councilwoman Ayala and Councilmember Salamanca, we know that there's more that needs to be done, and that's part of the announcement today.
Do you have any figures on the program?
I think we'll need to get back to you on the figures.
Staten Island comparison. You mentioned that the populations are different in Staten Island as they are in the Bronx. Is there a difference in the drugs that are being taken?
Is there a difference in the drugs?
And were we seeing like people using heroin are now switching over to fentanyl?
So I think, as you've heard alluded, the epidemics did start out in a different way. So on Staten Island, there was probably an initial increase that started out people with prescription drugs transitioning to heroin. In the Bronx, it was a more stable heroin epidemic all along. I think the unifying theme among both is the explosion of fentanyl, especially in heroin, but we're also starting to see, it's important to note that we're starting to see even other drugs being cut with fentanyl, things like cocaine, very problematic. This is one of the reasons that we are really being very intensifying our efforts on the campaign around the presence and the deadliness of fentanyl, and why naloxone is in fact such a critical piece, because fentanyl really shortens the time between overdose and death. So you have to be able to get to somebody quickly to save them, which is why really flooding the zone with naloxone is critically important, because the clock is ticking much faster.
Strategies that you're taking about, how to tailor it specifically for the Bronx compared to Staten Island in terms of those drug changes?
So right now, both are largely heroin-based epidemics with fentanyl. But the truth is, a sound public health approach really we want to make sure that we understand the evidence-based practices. We also want to tailor those practices to the needs of the population to make sure that we are addressing specific needs. And that's one of the things that you're hearing today, is that we are really trying to understand better what is it that Bronx communities need to be able to achieve the same success.
Yes,
what I would
Dave.
add to that is that we just really want to emphasize the importance of fentanyl in this equation, and that 57% of the deaths that happen for opioids are attributable to fentanyl. And the fact that we are now seeing fentanyl in cocaine as well as heroin, I think, is an important message that we want to make sure that gets out there, because independent of whether a community has more history using heroin or more history using cocaine, the reality is that we need folks educated about the risks and to know where to go for help and where to get linked to services.
So the other piece, when we talking about fentanyl, here's the fentanyl test strip kit. where we provide with every one of our individuals that come to our agency to test their heroin to see if there is any fentanyl in the heroin. This also comes with more education that we give the individual if it tests positive. Where we give the harm reduction strategy, don't use by yourself, take a test shot. Let somebody know where you're at. Because like I said, even if it comes with fentanyl in it, that person is not going to throw that bag away.
Let's wrap up in a minute on, this is questions about this announcement and media questions. I just want to remind people, media questions. Are you media over there? If not, we're going to just finish with the media. Okay.
What's your current timeline for opening this revised injection facility in Longwood and in other areas of the city? And what are you doing to make sure that the state gives its okay? What's the holdup?
There's been a consistent dialogue with the state. I am hopeful for an answer relatively soon. Look, we went through at the city level. I want to be the first to say it is a complex issue. There's a lot to consider. When we get the go-ahead from the state health department, we're ready to get moving. We've got, remember what we said would be the approach. We would want to know that the state health department agreed, both because we thought that was crucial for coordination on the medical and health side, but we also thought that was legally important. We needed to have the district attorney in each area be in agreement. I haven't checked the latest, but I believe that's true in the case of the 3 boroughs where we've identified locations. We would need the individual council member to be in agreement and there to be a community consultative process. Again, I believe that standard has been met in these locations. So we would be ready to move as soon as the state health department indicates. Obviously, we expect, it's been quite public, that the federal government will attempt to obstruct overdose prevention centers. At that point, if that were to occur, we would take the federal government to court.
That's right.
We believe that we have a strong legal basis for defending this idea. This is about saving lives. This is about health. This is a proven approach. You only need to go across the border into Canada to see how it has saved lives. Largest cities in Canada use this and save lives and then get people to treatment. So once we have the state health department approval, those other local steps will be fulfilled, and then we want to see this effort start.
On their end, what is their concern?
I can't speak to that. You should ask them. I will only say there has been an ongoing dialogue. And again, it took us objectively months to review all the issues and come to a final decision. When we presented it to them, I don't remember the exact month, but it wasn't that long ago. But I do hope that their answer will come soon.
Is there a point where the city would move forward without state approval?
No, we've been very clear. State approval, and for the state approval overall, and then for the specific site, the DA's approval, and a consultative process with the community, which must include the approval of the council member. Obviously, some people in the community may have one view, some may have another, but we need the council member on board. And then a nonprofit that's already doing similar work would set up the capacity. It is not publicly funded. It is not run by the government. It will be run by a nonprofit with their own resources. Last call on anything related to opioids. Okay, I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you all for being here. You can go and do other good work. Last call. If you're not sticking around, please move out so we can start the next piece of the press conference. All right, almost. Eric, just to help folks know to keep moving a little bit if they are not staying.
Hole in there.
Yeah, it is. Okay, what you got, everyone?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there's been a recent rash, 6 incidents of delivery men in Manhattan who have been robbed of their motorized bikes.
Say robbed of them, right? Yeah.
And he was looking for 2 men in connection with this matter. This controversy over what are your thoughts?
Well, look, that is the first time I've heard of a pattern like this. And obviously the NYPD, when they see any kind of criminal pattern, they now do a very good job of stopping it quickly. So I'm assuming that the perpetrators are going to be caught in short order. This is something they're doing out in the open. You know, we tend to have video. We tend to get people very quickly. The bigger issue needs resolution. And we're still trying to understand if all of that needs to come from Albany or if some of that can be done locally. But we've got to figure out what will keep people safe. This is my first concern with any of these new or newer technologies. Safety first. Obviously, we want people to have as many ways as possible to get around. But I think right now it is what will keep people safe. And where do the decisions ultimately have to be made? Do they all have to be made by the legislature, or can some of them be done locally? That's still an open question. Yeah.
Sort of a similar question. Well, that was about scooters. There's been talk of legalizing e-bikes. What do you think of that?
So let's, again, separate the two. I think we've got a safety issue that is quite clear to me, and I've heard it from so many people around neighborhoods of the city, around the e-bikes which go very fast, not the pedal assist. There's 2 kinds, but the kinds of e-bikes that a lot of the delivery folks have used go very fast and unfortunately have often been abused. Going the wrong way on streets, driving recklessly, and there's a lot of problems related to that. It's also just not legal. It's not legal to use them in New York City. That is the law, period. So based on both the safety problem and the sheer legal reality, we ordered a crackdown last year, which we're continuing. The only way to resolve that issue is in Albany. And if we're going to resolve it in Albany, it has to be done in a way that will protect public safety. On the scooters, the e-scooters, that's something newer. And again, I'm certainly interested in anything that will help people get around better, but there's also safety issues there that has to be resolved. So one, we got to figure out where the final decisions have to be made. 2, as we try and craft a solution, first concern has to be safety. Go ahead.
Sorry, assuming that there's, different, if it was to be legalized, assuming that there's different safety regulations placed around it, do you think that this is something that the city would ultimately embrace, or do you think that this is something that should not be legalized, period?
I am open to a process that gets us a safe outcome, right? If I can see something that will create safety in the city and allow people to use e-bikes or e-scooters, I'm very open to that. Now, I haven't seen that yet. So right now, I'm staying exactly where I am on the e-bikes. They're not legal in New York City, and there have been real safety problems. We're going to continue to enforce. The e-scooters are so new in most cities that we really don't have a take yet on the pros and cons, but any solution must address public safety. That's my simple formula.
I want to ask you about an audit from the Comptroller's Office regarding the Department of Education and some spending on travel.
Yeah.
They overpaid the Brooklyn Marriott, they spent on trips, stays at the Opryland Hotel in Nashville, all manner of other kind of trips away. Are you concerned at all about the spending? Do you want to see them generated in?
Definitely concerned. And I have not seen the audit, but I have spoken to the chancellor and said that we have to make sure that money is used appropriately, and anything inappropriate has to be stopped, and there may have to be some consequences for some people involved. Look, I'm the first to say there are very legitimate reasons for educators to go to conferences in a time when we're emphasizing professional development, right? We need a lot more STEM teachers, for example. Sometimes they're going to a conference to learn new skills that they're going to bring back to their classrooms. We need a lot more computer science teachers as part of our Computer Science for All initiative. This is the fundamental problem. Everyone's ready to see it taught across all grade levels. We don't have enough trained teachers. If the training's available somewhere and it's a fair deal economically, that's good for the city. But what we don't want is money being spent that doesn't need to be spent. That's not acceptable. Same with field trips. Field trips are part of the school experience. There's a way to do that that makes a lot of sense, and there might be a way that doesn't make sense. So I'm definitely concerned. I want to see a full accounting. I want to make sure money is used right. If anyone didn't use the money right, there need to be consequences. Go.
Follow up on the scooter question. I'm curious, have you been to any cities recently where they have the scooters? Have you seen them? What's your...
Just sparingly. I've seen a couple of the scooters in action, and I can't remember which city it was, honestly, but it didn't give me enough take to understand the ramifications. I mean, look, we're not like any other city. We have to be clear. I could see scooters on the sidewalks in New York City being a real challenge. I could see scooters in the streets being a real challenge. But I also understand people are looking for new ways to get around. That's why I keep saying in a lot of cases, I would love to see us first figure out what will work and then move forward with letting people have the opportunity. But I don't think we've figured that out yet. Going back, yes. And
follow up on the audit, the DOE audit. One sample in the audit was of $1 million worth of travel expenses. They found that in 93% of the cases, it wasn't done properly. They didn't get the cheaper options. It seemed like either there was absolutely no understanding of the rules or there was an attitude of just spend the money.
Yeah, that's not acceptable, obviously. Look, where I always want to be careful, when any audit, we're going to look at and learn from and act on. It doesn't mean we necessarily think every single thing in the audit is accurate. We also will challenge if we think there's something that isn't. But when you talk about, do you need the proper sign-off? Are the checks and balances being followed? Are you trying to get the cheapest rate? That's like 101. That's like really basic stuff. If that's not being done, something's wrong. And that is fixable, and it must be fixed. And I want to give the chancellor a lot of credit. You saw when he, very early on in his tenure, dealt with the school bus issue. And he took immediate personal responsibility, and he got rid of people who were doing the wrong thing very, very quickly. I think he has a can-do attitude about cleaning up things like this. Yes, behind. Yeah.
Last week I asked you about the security video at the ferry when the dog sat down to a suspicious package. That evidence was left there for several minutes before anything was done.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to watch it? Have you spoken to the...
So I'm meeting with the police commissioner this week, and this is on the agenda. I'm going to look at the video in anticipation of that meeting. I'm obviously concerned. There's never a situation where security personnel should ignore an unattended package. It's just as simple as that. Now, again, I want to reserve my final statement on that video for seeing it, and I want to ask the commissioner his interpretation. But I want to be clear about the standard. We keep saying, if you see something, say something. Obviously, that means that our uniformed personnel have to live by that same standard. If they see something, they have to address it. Marcia? Before the meeting with the police commissioner, I will. Yes.
There are 4 bills that are being introduced today in the city council about the e-bike in the schools. So clearly, the council is intent on trying to pass some legislation that would legalize this form of transportation. I know that you've expressed a concern about safety.
Yes.
Research that I've done in terms of cities that have had safety shows an increase in e-bike accidents along with the increase in the cities. I wonder if that concerns you.
Yes.
Say e-bikes are not right for you.
I'm not there, but I'm everywhere until that last statement. I am seeing too many problems with e-bikes already, and that's why we crack down on them. That doesn't mean you can't figure out a way to address the problem. So I'm not going to rule out that we can come up with a resolution, and the same with the scooters. But what we saw so far, again, there's two different types. There's what we typically call the e-bikes, and then there's the pedal assist. The pedal assist are often used by folks with disabilities, in some cases seniors, and those have more of a clear speed limit on them. And that might be part of a solution, is somehow physically putting the mechanism in place that these e-bikes can't go as fast as they have been going around this town. But under current conditions, there is a safety problem. The only way I would get comfortable is if we can address that safety problem. Yes. Thank you. That's why I'm saying the safety standard has to be met. If we can't become convinced that it's safe, I can't support it. Now, let's be clear. And the Vision Zero, you could take that same example and bring it the other way. Cars create a danger. We're using a set of strategies to make sure that we reduce that danger. We're not telling people you can't use cars anymore. We're saying we got to do a lot of things differently. So by the same logic, there may be a way to figure out how to keep e-bikes safe and keep communities safe with e-bikes, how to use e-scooters. But the difference now is, since we're starting from zero, e-bikes aren't legal and there's no regulation for scooters and they're just starting to get here, why don't we get it right and say, what are all the things we need to put in place to keep people safe before we just let this become a bigger problem? I'm not that attracted, honestly. If I'm going to ride a bike, I would rather ride a traditional bike and get some exercise in the process. Yes?
Mayor, the First Lady are headed to Vermont this weekend to participate in
Yeah.
an event. My understanding is a government-paid-for trip. I was wondering if both of you or one of you could address why it's an official trip and not a political one, and what you hope to get out of being part of this event.
I'll start and share your thoughts as well. This is a gathering of progressive leaders from around the country to talk about policies that we need to implement. And some of them will require legislation, and some of them can be done at the local level. In fact, the specific panel that I'll be moderating is about what mayors are doing right now, regardless of the challenges in Washington, progressive policies that are working on the ground in American cities and in global cities that we need more, we need to show can work and get to more places. This is exactly why you gather with other people in public life, to share ideas, to figure out what works, to show them good examples that they can build on. I always say some of the best things we've done in New York City, we learned from other people's example. I appreciated Marcia's kind comment on Vision Zero. We didn't invent Vision Zero. We've been very open about it. We gently borrowed it from places like Sweden. We didn't invent the local ID card. We got that from Oakland and New Haven. Now, I think in each case we took the ideas and built upon them. But this kind of interchange is really, really important. And I've said that, I think it's crucial, instead of cursing the darkness that there's conflict in Washington and kind of a lot of paralysis, to keep building progressive change on the ground in American cities and American states. So I'm excited for this conference because I think a lot of people who can really make an impact will be there. You want to add?
Yeah. Everywhere I go, I talk about mental health, and as you have seen from the stories told here today, we're in a crisis, and the only way we're going to get to a place where we can address this crisis with all the solutions that we need is by talking with other people about what they're doing, sharing what we're doing here, and making sure that we have legislation on the federal level, on the state level, as well as employing ideas on the local level to address what's going on in terms of mental illness and substance use disorders. There's a lot of work to do. Thrive was started with ideas borrowed from all over the country, all over the world, actually. We borrowed from what they're doing in Zimbabwe and Haiti. And everywhere I go, I learn new things, and I also share what we're doing. New York City is leading the way in terms of applying solutions to the mental health crisis that we're in, but there's still more to do. And I love to go to these kinds of gatherings to have the opportunity to talk with so many different kinds of people about what's going on in their area.
Last thing I want to say to this is I think the world changes when attitudes change. What is possible? So, for example, I believe fundamentally on mental health. You're going to see a breakthrough in the next few years. I know it because I get the reports from Chirlane when she meets with both Republican and Democratic members of the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, and leaders, mayors and other leaders in cities around the country, and people are more and more saying the same thing. When the attitudes change, when the sense of possibility changes, that's when you actually could get to some legislation that could get through Washington potentially. So the part I think is often left out of the discussion is the bigger changes we need have to be built. They won't happen on their own. They have to be built. And a lot of the good that we can do for the city that could come from changes in Washington is going to come from slowly but surely convincing people that something can be done. Yes?
Today, that city planning is moving forward with a vote on a pretty large development in the Two Bridges area of the Lower East Side without a full land use review because they're determined it doesn't need one. That caused a lot of concern from local elected officials who want to be able to review something of such magnitude. What do you think of their concern that the borough president, community board, and city council will have say in this process?
Look, this is a very unusual situation. It goes back to an urban renewal initiative years ago. This particular area is governed by a very specific set of rules. But that said, there's been a huge community debate. And it was quite clear to the administration that whatever happened here, we had to get real action on community needs, affordable housing and infrastructure needs, open space, things like that. So recognizing that the legalities made quite clear that this development could go forward, we still found a way to get a set of guarantees for the public in it. And I think that was the practical, realistic way to handle the situation. We need more housing in the city. We know that. We need a whole lot more affordable housing. This set of development, these buildings will at least bring us a lot of that as part of the ultimate plan. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, knowing the sidewalks of New York as you do know them, and the remarkably smooth streets of New York City as you know them.
Wow. Yeah. I want to live in your alternate reality. It sounds wonderful.
Can you imagine a way that these e-scooters would survive here? And could you imagine yourself riding one?
Well, it's an excellent question. Can I imagine myself riding one? I just don't like the idea personally. Because I'm like, if you're going to move around, why are you not getting some exercise? It just like it seems really passive to me. And so it's just not personally appealing. But can I imagine it working in New York City? I think for the reason you said, the still too rough roads, despite all of our repaving, the amount of traffic and all, I think it's harder here objectively than other places. And it's not, you certainly can't say, oh, just go on the sidewalk. That's not necessarily going to be easy either. So I think we have an interesting question before us. It's a new technology a lot of people are going to find appealing. But how does it work here, even if here is different from a lot of other places? I don't have the answer. We have to work on that answer. But am I interested personally? No. Okay, we'll do a few more. Okay, I see 3, and then you'll be 4, and we'll be out of here. All right.
Your response made me think that you seem a little more comfortable with the idea of people moving around New York City on e-scooters than on e-bikes now. And it's hard for me to imagine that residents who complain about e-bikes do not also complain about e-scooters. Why do you think one is going to be different than the other?
So you are catching a nuance, but I want to go back to my off-stated larger reality. I said a bunch of times, I'm going to say again, the safety concern is exactly the same. Figure out how we address safety first, then address legalization. And I'm really sick of the cart being before the horse. I fear that's about to happen with marijuana, which is why I keep saying, could we please figure out how we're regulating before we actually legalize? So I say the same here. There are real safety issues. I think you're right to say there's a difference. A bike is a bigger thing than a scooter, right? A bike, and a lot of people, I hear this from a lot of my constituents, I hear this particularly from a lot of seniors. They fear being hit by not just a bike, a motorized bike that can go pretty fast, especially if it's going the wrong way, especially if it's, in some cases, going up on the sidewalk or driving recklessly. That's a real concern. I think a scooter presents less of that concern, but I still think there's a safety issue.
There was a report earlier this week that DOI essentially spiked an investigation about the disciplining of police officers who lie in official documents report or what have you. Is that something that you've made any inquiries about, and would you like to see the new DOI commissioner do a similar report, either take up that report if it was halted or do a report on that topic?
That article was news to me. And I think the right way to proceed, because obviously more than one thing had gone wrong at DOI, is to have a new commissioner who is a respected leader come in and do her own analysis of everything happening there and set a new course. I think that's the way we resolve it. And I leave it to her to determine what to do with the information that's been surfaced.
During the press conference, King Jeffries won the race for Democratic caucus chair, so will now be number 4 in the Democratic House leadership. Defeating Barbara Lee, just wanted to get your response to that. Is that good for New York? And he now seems to be, one of the youngest, or the youngest member of the House leadership, potentially making him a future Speaker of the House candidate.
That's very good for New York. I congratulate Congressman Jeffries, and I'll talk to him later today to congratulate him personally. And no, it's great for New York. We need our people in leadership positions. And look, let's remember, the election on November 6th catapulted New Yorkers into primary positions in the House of Representatives, especially Nita Lowey as the Appropriations Chair and Jerry Nadler as the Judiciary Chair. But to also have one of the top positions in the Democratic leadership go to a New Yorker is a very, very good thing. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries is a real capable guy. He's a powerful spokesperson for the Democratic Party. But he's also someone who's going to watch out for the interests in New York City. So I'm very happy about it. Finally.
Over the summer, when you were on Staten Island, you said that you would consider looking into help private property owners get deer stuck for days out of their backyards.
I'm sorry, get deer?
Deer stuck in private property owners.
Do you mean alive or dead? Okay. Yes, that's why I'm quite aware. That's why I want to make sure we know what we're talking about here.
It's meeting season right now. We get these calls and emails all the time.
Yeah.
People calling different agencies, getting passed around to one and every agency under the sun, and they can't get the deer out of their backyards. I know Councilman Blasio also sent you a letter asking you to implement a clear protocol or policy to help.
Yeah. One, I haven't seen his letter. I think very highly of Councilman Matteo. I just haven't seen the letter. I will look at it. But the bottom line is he's right. We need a clear plan. Now, on using the gentle phrase carcasses, we did initiate an effort to remove carcasses, and we're going to do that. But in terms of live deer stuck in a fence or something like that, that's a real issue, and we got to figure out the right way to handle it. It's not, everyone understands this is not something historically the city of New York had a lot to do with because it wasn't a problem for most of our history. But we can't just leave people to figure it out for themselves. We got to see if there's something we can do to be helpful. So we will, in light of Councilman Matteo's letter, we'll come back with what we can do. Okay, thanks everyone.